Many people would think that magic and science are two distinct things, separated from each other by a chasm of logic and reality. That, however, is a misconception. They are more like two sides of a coin, each unique in design but part of the same whole. Magic might be able to bend or warp reality, but it has never once broken it in the history of its use. Not for a lack of trying, naturally, by those foolhardy enough to push the bounds of possibility. Society had grown up with magic always being there, and it was certainly a handy tool to have during the early days of civilization. You feel cold at night? With the right know-how and a snap of your fingers, you can set those logs alight by generating friction on its surface. Thirsty? Try extracting the water out of the air and giving yourself a nice mouthful to tide you over. The uses of magic only expanded with our knowledge of how the world worked on a foundational level. Advanced sciences improve the abilities of mages by leaps and bounds. A trip to outer space is a rather simple concept when you can lessen the effects of gravity and wind resistance. Transportation, terrestrially, was a breeze. When trains could run on frictionless tracks and cars can roll on perpetual motion engines, powered with magic to prevent entropy of energy. All this and more birthed by clever minds and arcane power. Naturally, it's obvious that many governments around the world would devote time and resources to better understanding both aspects of the world they live in. Many organizations, both public and private, have emerged over the decades with the goal of developing the next big thing in magic and getting their names written down in the history books. It was the dream of anyone who possessed even a middling amount of talent in the arcane arts. There was one organization that was pushing further than any other to stretch the limits of science and magic. It had a frankly quite corny and punny name, but it was popular for coming up with innovative new uses for magic. It was called Magic Touch. Yes, it was that kind of eye-rolling name, almost to the same level as a dad joke. Still, names aside, they were the premier company working in the field, and only the best got hired. They were the brightest stars of the era, the most inquisitive minds of a generation, and the largest collection of absolute nutcases that you could encounter in a lifetime. A group of these individuals were currently engaged in a project, the likes of which they believed would alter the very foundations of the world as they knew it. A camera was turned on and began recording what was obviously a lab. Vials, microscopes, beakers, arcane focuses, the standard fare, and so much more. A middle-aged man is in the frame, as he sits down in a chair. He has a messy head of brown hair, and a slight bit of stubble on his face, but was otherwise an average Joe in most regards. His body was slim, but carried signs of muscles that at least proved he didn't spend every hour of the day in the labs. He cleared his throat and began to speak. Alright, recording number 42, test number... He checked his notes with a glance. 17. The date is January the 10th, 2032 at 2:18 p.m. This recording is part of the test group for Project Ion. Previous tests have shown positive results, and we are now ready to begin the next phase of... He is interrupted as suddenly a woman comes sliding through the back of the frame, on a wheeled chair while complaining loudly. Boring! A moment later she slides back the other way, this time with a spin. Whee! The woman has light blonde hair, a slender face with freckles that dot around her cheeks, and an average-weighted body for a lady her size. Jessica, can you please act professionally for 5 minutes? I'm trying to make the official recording here. Nope, she answers immediately, as she slides around again. He sighs and rubs his face in exasperation, and that was before another distraction came. A man opened a door in the background before stepping inside. He had black hair with a matching beard that covered his slightly pudgy face in inch-long hairs. He had a small beer belly, but didn't look to be overly unhealthy. He held up a Tupperware box and gave it a shake, which created a shuffling sound from inside. I brought cookies! Yay, cookies! Jessica shouted, as she shot out of the chair, and rushed to the new arrival. "Ryan, I told you no more food in the lab. You're going to contaminate the testing area." "Contaminate what?" Ryan asked as he munched on a cookie. "We're not biologists. Cookie crumbs don't affect magic." "It's unsanitary. There's not even mentioning how it gets everywhere and is all over your workstations, which, by the way, I always end up having to clean for you." "Jeez, Joshua, you need a chill pill and a cookie. Here, I've got a good selection. Which one you want?" Ryan shook the container at him with a teasing smile on his face. Joshua facepalmed before dragging his hand downward, stretching his features as he did so. "I guess I'm gonna have to do the recording afterward. Give me a goddamn chocolate chip," he finally says, as he turns off the camera. Ryan's smile only grew as Joshua finally submitted to the law of baked deliciousness. "Knew you'd come around eventually. Yes, that's right. Give in to the dark side. We have cookies." His voice took on a dramatic tone, as Joshua snatched his preferred cookie from the container with an irritated glare. "How is it that I'm the only one in this group who can even act remotely professional?" he asked, as he took an overly hostile bite of his chocolate chip treat. "Because you're a stick in the mud," Jessica said as she rolled by in her chair, voice distorted by all the cookies she had crammed in her mouth. "Don't talk with your mouth full. Were you raised in a damn barn?" She starts making pig noises, mockingly, only to choke on a chunk of cookie before starting to cough, as she's forced to spit some of it into the trash can. "Serves you right." "Easy, girl," Ryan says as he gives her a pat on the back. "Can't have you being the one cookie-related fatality on the company's record book. I mean, how embarrassing would that be? At least die in a cool way, like teleporting yourself into another dimension and going out in a blaze of glory against eldritch abominations, the likes of which this world has never seen." "You need to stop playing those Doom games, dude," Joshua chastised him. "I'm allowed to do whatever the hell I feel like in my free time, thank you very much. What are you, my mother?" "No. And I don't envy her the lamentable position of being related to a man-child like yourself." "Aw, did Joshy not get enough hugs and kisses from Mummy and Daddy?" Ryan adopted a baby voice as he mocked him. "I will punch you in the damn nose." Jessica hopped back into her chair with a laugh after her near brush with sugary sweet death. "Ah, you two are cute. You should kiss so I can write a fanfic about it and get all the internet ladies feeling hot and bothered." "As you wish, my lady." Ryan came in hot towards Joshua, lips puckered as he made kissing sounds. "I will punch you." Ryan backed up before he got too close, as he and Jessica laughed boisterously after they'd had their fun. Joshua just groaned as he rubbed his face again. "If you idiots are done, can we begin the experiment now?" Ryan waved a hand in front of his face in a dismissive manner. Yeah. Just trying to lighten the mood. You've been so serious these last few months." "You could stand to be a little more serious," Joshua said as he crossed his arms. "We're planning on doing something that has never been attempted, something that would change the rules of this world on a foundational level. It's taken years of work and trials to get to this point, and you two are sitting here eating cookies like you're on vacation." "No use in stressing about it. Either we succeed and get to party for the foreseeable future, or we don't and just continue doing what we have been doing for the last several years. Whatever the outcome, I'm probably going to be eating cookies regardless." Even as he was saying that, he pulled out another one and started munching. "You know, I'm not convinced you actually passed the drug test when they employed you." "I plead the fifth," Ryan said with a smirk. Jessica jumped into the conversation, tired of all the waiting around. "Come on, enough talking. Let's make history, or at least make it blow up in a pretty way." "Jessica, I'm going to be standing inside it. Please don't wish for it to blow up." "Yeah, Jess," Ryan cut in. "It's very unlikely to explode anyway. More likely it will create a micro black hole for a fraction of a second and spaghettify him." "You know what? Fuck you both. I'm starting with or without you, and I hope you're caught in whatever blast radius might happen." Ryan laughed as he and Jessica followed. "Come on, It would be a cool death at least. Joshua ignored him as he set up the camera again, pointing it at the testing area deeper in the room. Begrudgingly, he accepted Ryan's help in moving the large metallic disc into view of the camera. The disc had many arcane symbols and circles all around its circumference, each one laser etched into the surface for precision in channeling. With the forces they were experimenting with, everything had to be near perfection for it to work. Meanwhile, Jessica set up the sensors and made sure they were picking up accurate readings. In about 15 minutes, they managed to have everything prepared properly. "Alright, that should just about do it," Joshua said as he checked his watch. It was approaching the top of the hour, and he figured there would be no better time to start the test. "Jessica, everything green on your end?" "Good to go over here, Captain," she replied enthusiastically as she sat in front of her computer. "Ryan, activate the isolation protocols and lock the room down." "On it." He typed a few commands on his laptop and then pressed a button on the wall near the entrance. Metal screens dropped down in front of the windows, each one etched with actively glowing magic circles of a different variety that would repel outside influences and natural mana fluctuations. This was the equivalent of sterilizing the test area to make sure nothing contaminated the results. "Locked down and isolated, ready to fire," Ryan confirmed as the process finished. Upon receiving the confirmation, Joshua moved the object that the experiment would be centered around into place, a basketball. It was placed several feet outside of the metallic circle as Joshua retreated to the center of the magical focus. He checked his watch again, seeing he had less than a minute until the hour was up. "Alright, the test will begin soon. Last checks, everyone." "All good over on the sensors," Jessica sounded off. "Barrier is holding. No fluctuations detected," Ryan confirmed. "Good luck, Josh. Remember, try to keep the black hole small. Would really put a damper on my day if I ended up in a localized event horizon." "Shut the fuck up before I drag you in here with me." Ryan raised his hands in mock surrender as Joshua shook his head before starting the countdown. "Alright, infusing mana into the runes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Joshua felt a wave of vertigo overtake him as his vision distorted for a moment. The runes glowed brightly, signaling that they accepted the magic and took effect. It all happened in the span of time. It took him to blink as his vision cleared and he looked around. Immediately, things felt off to his senses. There was no sound, no hum from machines or air conditioning. Even the creak of a chair was absent. He looked at his partners and saw that they were completely still, eerily and unnaturally so. It sunk in for him at that moment. It worked. We did it. We stopped time. His elation was tempered when he remembered he didn't have long. Oh crap, need to move. Only have 10 seconds to act. He quickly stepped out of the circle and picked up the basketball. Holding it at about eye level, he let go and marveled as it simply sat there, suspended in the air. He stepped back to the opposite side of the testing area from the circle and waited for the effects to wear off. And waited, and waited, and waited. Joshua's brow dropped as he was certain that more than 10 seconds had passed by this point. He pulled up his sleeve and looked at his watch, only to realize that he was an idiot because time was frozen, so his watch wouldn't be ticking. Time is frozen. He felt himself pale as dread exploded in his heart. Time wasn't moving. That meant that 10 seconds wasn't passing. That meant... His body was racked with tremors as the reality of the situation sunk in. The room started spinning. His head felt like it was filled with helium. He was breathing too fast. For a moment, he lost his balance and staggered backward into the cabinets behind him, using them to keep himself standing. Oh God. How did we not think of this? How did I not consider this in the calculations? It's such a simple fucking concept that we all just overlooked it? Fuck. Fuck, 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 fuck! Joshua began tearing his way around the room, rifling for his notes and any of the tools they had, both mundane and magical. His partners just sat there, frozen perpetually in time to his perception. Nobody on his team had accounted for this. There were no notes or calculations that were readily available that could have helped him. Shit! Even throwing the papers wasn't cathartic in any way, as they simply froze in the air as soon as he stopped touching them. When he tried to use a computer, none of the keys responded, because the computer had no time to process the commands with. In a fit of frustration, he slammed his fist down on the computer and yelled at it for being useless. The punch made his fist hurt a bit, which brought some lucidity back to his mind. Okay, wait. Don't panic. I need to think. I can't get out of this if I don't think rationally. There has to be a way out. There has to be. He started to pace around the room, running numbers and calculations through his mind. It felt like every time he thought of a potential solution or path to take, a dozen problems sprung up, most of them having to do with time not moving, or the fact that he was alone and had to produce everything by himself. His team had spent years researching this, and only just got it to work with the backing of a multi-billion-dollar company. Thinking was quickly starting to backfire on him, as he was falling into a spiral again at how hopeless his situation appeared. It had hardly been 15 perceived minutes since he became trapped, and he was already on the verge of a breakdown. An overwhelming feeling of dread was smothering him, as he considered he might be stuck in this situation for the rest of his life. He buried his face in his hands while leaning heavily against a wall. Eventually his legs gave out on him, and he slid to the floor as tremors racked his body. As he sat, nearly hyperventilating on the edge of his own sanity, he looked up from his hands and towards his partners. Jessica sat at her computer, a hopeful smile forever stuck on her face, as she looked at the spot where he had been standing when the experiment began. Ryan was hunched over a little bit behind his laptop, with his mouth open, frozen in the moment he tried to sneak another cookie as the experiment began. Joshua let out a shuddering breath as he stood back up. I can't give up, not without trying everything I can possibly do first. His stance may have been unsteady, but his eyes were determined as he started to collect materials from around the room that he could use to begin simple experiments. Everything. Every last goddamn option I have. 15 seconds earlier. Would really put a dampener on my day if I ended up in a localized event horizon. Shut the fuck up before I drag you in here with me. Ryan raised his hands in mock surrender, as Joshua shook his head before starting the countdown. Alright, infusing mana into the runes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the entire room was turned inside out. With a rush of wind, things exploded all over the lab, as bottles crashed to the ground and against walls. Papers were scattered in the air, some in shreds, and there were many more than had been in the room a moment ago. Devices and machinery had suddenly appeared as well, many of which looked more like they belonged in a woodshop class than a state-of-the-art lab. Jessica yelped in surprise and ducked her head at all the sudden noise and explosive movement. There was a brief and strange sensation, like someone had touched her all over her body, but it faded almost as soon as she felt it. Ryan, on the other hand, was launched backwards, a shout of pain on his lips as he tumbled to the ground. He clutched at his face, his nose bleeding and broken. "Ryan, you alright?" Jessica shouted. "Ugh, I'll live," he groaned in reply. "Joshua, are you... Where's Joshua?" They both looked around the room, concern etched on their faces. "Josh? Come on, man, this ain't funny." Despite his normally nonchalant nature about everything, Ryan felt genuine worry when he noticed that it was only the two of them in the room now. Actually, now that he was looking around, he had another question on his mind. What the fuck happened here? Not only had the room been turned upside down and was a complete mess, but the entirety of the back wall had been redecorated in a style that he could only call insane asylum. Numerous tally marks had been dug into the surface of the wall, so many that he could not count the exact number, but there must have been hundreds. All over the floor on that side of the room there were papers, dozens of them, and when he looked at a few he could see advanced mathematical formulas coupled with crudely sketched runes and magic circles. It was research on the same level as what they had been doing in the lab, only the subject of it he didn't quite understand. A few parts looked like they were meant to do the opposite of what they had been working on. "Ryan, over here," Jessica said, to summon him to the other end of the room. She was looking with wide eyes and a small amount of fear at the numerous magical circles that consumed every bit of spare room on the floor. The mediums used to create them varied wildly as well. Some were drawn with chalk, others with pens. Then there was charcoal, pencil, paint, and even one that was chiseled into the ground. The most disturbing of all, though, was the one she had her sight locked on. "Ryan, I need you to tell me that isn't blood that I'm looking at right now." He found it difficult to comply with her request. It did indeed look like someone had drawn a magic circle and accompanying runes onto the ground using blood as a medium. The panic that both of them were experiencing at that moment grew exponentially. "Joshua, where the fuck are you?" Ryan ran around the room, checking every nook and cranny, even going so far as to open the cupboards and look inside. Jessica was breathing heavily as she stood, stunned, staring vacant-eyed at the bloody circle on the ground. When she finally managed to tear her gaze away from it, she saw a small stack of papers held down by a rock, both things she had never seen before and which stood out. She moved over to examine it, and as she read the first few lines on the front page, her eyes widened. "Ryan, get over here!" The man snapped to attention, and then rushed over to see what she had found. As the two of them hunched over the papers, they began to read together. To Ryan and Jessica. If it wasn't obvious, this is Joshua writing to you right now. I know that you two could have figured out what happened to me with a bit of time, but in case you found this before then, allow me to explain. The circle worked. It stopped time for me. Normally there would be cause for celebration, considering the years we spent on this project, but we overlooked something. The spell was set to end after 10 seconds, but how can those seconds come to pass when time is frozen? Jessica gasped as she understood what went wrong, covering her mouth in horror, and Ryan went pale as a ghost when he read those words. Both of them began to immediately blame themselves for being so stupid and missing something as obvious as that. However, Joshua apparently guessed what they would be feeling. "Don't blame yourselves. I overlooked it as well. Frankly, with how many late nights and coffee-fueled grind session I went through in pursuit of this, I'm probably the most at fault. So there's no one to blame but myself. Regardless, let me get to the reason why I'm writing. There are two reasons, actually. One is to serve to inform you of what happened and everything that I tried here, so I didn't just disappear on you without explanation. I wouldn't want you to carry that burden. The second is for my own benefit, as I need something to help ground me to reality and keep my thoughts focused. It's so fucking unnerving with everything frozen. There's no sound from anything, other than what I make myself. I only started writing this approximately 2 weeks into me being trapped like this, and I say approximately because I have no way of telling the time. I'm perpetually stuck at 3 goddamn PM, and I'm basically counting days by how often I sleep. Writing like this makes me feel like I'm talking to you, in a way, which helps me keep my thoughts off the possibility that I might... There are many aggressive lines scribbled over the next part of the sentence, making it illegible. Anyway, I'm trying to test ideas of how to get me back into real time, and so far, it hasn't been going well. I'm working with fucking caveman tools and the shit they built the pyramids with. I've already stolen a few things from the local hardware store. Not my proudest moment, but I'll pay them back tenfold if it helps me get out of this. Wish me luck, I guess. A break in the writing occurs, which signals that some time has passed since he last started writing. Hey guys, I'm back. Fuck me. It's been about 3 months since I've been trapped. All of the simple solutions that were easily available are no good. Hand-drawing metrical circles on the floor is getting really fucking old at this point, especially since they all fizzle out without doing a damn thing. It's the accuracy of my drawings. It has to be. We use lasers to get the kind of precision we needed for our experiments, but that's not an option for me because none of that advanced machinery works. I'm going to have to get creative, which means a lot more math. I could really use your help, Jessica, but hopefully I learned a thing or two from you during our years together. Hell, I'd take even Ryan's dumbass inputs at this point. If there's one thing he could do, it was construct a magically sound arcane circle. In unrelated notes, I found out that I can basically walk on water today. It appears that liquid surfaces act more like a gel when I touch them, and so long as its mass is greater than my own, I can walk on it. Doesn't exactly help me, but it was a nice distraction. Ryan and Jessica both allowed a small smile as they read that their friend found a brief moment of respite, where he could do something that was considered fun. They kept reading as they turned to another page. I'm going to have to start this page with an apology to Ryan. I ended up punching him in the face in a fit of frustration. Sorry, dude. Ryan's brow dropped as he gingerly touched his broken nose. Asshole, he muttered. I know it sounds like I'm making excuses, but after approximately 5 months, and who the hell knows if my count is even accurate at this point, I'm starting to lose it a bit. It doesn't help that I'm not seeing any progress or signs of success in anything that I've done. I regretted it the moment I hit you, dude, and I apologize profusely to your face, even if you can't hear me anymore. I'm definitely starting to lose it. I caught myself having a conversation with you two for nearly an hour, even though most of it was happening inside my head. I don't know how to explain what I'm feeling exactly. It's like a fog in my mind that grows thicker with every passing day, and a pressure in my chest that intensifies the longer I go without speaking. That's probably why I keep talking to you, even though it's a one-sided conversation. If I stop, I feel like I'm going to be crushed under the pressure. Ryan and Jessica furrowed their brows, increasing levels of worry building in them, as Joshua detailed how his sanity was starting to be worn away. They wished they could have done something, but in the back of their minds, they knew it would be useless to try at this point. The only thing they could do was keep reading. This is kind of awkward to write about, and I'm not sure how best to go about it. Maybe I should just start by apologizing to you this time, Jessica. I'm a creep, and a weirdo, and a pervert, and I'm so fucking sorry. There was another row of words that were scribbled out and illegible. No, I'll be honest. I touched you, Jessica. At first I just wanted a hug, but then I started to grope you in inappropriate places. It wasn't for long, because I realized what I was doing, and I even hit myself for doing it. Gave myself a fucking black eye. Jessica felt her face turn red a bit, as she remembered that feeling she got when everything exploded around her. She tried to put it out of her mind, and kept reading. I have no excuse, and I don't expect any forgiveness or sympathy. It was an act of desperation. I just wanted to feel some form of comfort for even a few minutes, after 7 months of this bullshit. The next part was shakily written, the letters unsteady and varying in size, even slipping out of their lines. I want to hear your voice again, Jessica. I want to hear Ryan's voice again. I want to hear something that isn't the sound of my increasingly insane ramblings, or my own heartbeat that seems to get louder in my ears the longer everything is quiet. I want to taste the cookies Ryan brings into the lab all the time. I'll never complain about them again, I promise. Please just make more cookies. Please just move even a little bit. Please. The sentence abruptly cuts off, as if he just gave up on writing at that point. Jessica started crying, her tears running down her face as her heart broke into pieces reading this. Ryan wasn't doing much better, barely holding himself together. He and Joshua may have bickered and argued on many things, but he still considered the man to be his friend, and this was crushing his soul to read. They turned to the last page, and both of them gasped in shock and horror. There were bloody fingerprints on the bottom of the page. Frantically, they started to read, both needing and fearing to find out what happened to him. I can't stay here any longer. I can't keep doing this. I'm hurting myself now trying to find a way out. I drew a circle in my own blood like a fucking ritual from a bygone era. I'm out of ideas. I have nothing left in me at this point. So, I'm leaving. Maybe if I visit other places I can get new ideas or find something that we don't have here that will help me. Even if I don't, at least traveling might help me maintain the last vestiges of my sanity and keep me alive for a little longer. I'm not sure what will happen to me at this point, and I'm sorry that I'm going to be leaving you without any clear answers. Maybe I'll find a way to reverse this, or maybe someone might find my body somewhere. The only thing I can ask of you two, beg of you, is to not follow me. Do not try to rescue me. Do not try to activate the runes again. Destroy it. Erase all the data we have on the subject, and replace it with a warning to never, never stop time. I know that it will feel like I'm asking you to abandon me, but by the time you are done reading this, I would have already lived multiple eternities. There's no saving me, no outside help. Either I succeed, or I fell on my own. I'm sorry, and I love you both like family. Truly. Goodbye. They turned the page over, and looked at the back in a desperate hope that maybe there was something else there. Nothing. It was blank, and there were no further writings of this nature anywhere to be seen. Jessica collapsed to the floor, sobbing, as she realized that Joshua was just gone now. Ryan knelt with her and put an arm around her shoulder. He tried to be strong for her, but even he couldn't help the few tears that trailed down his face, before disappearing into his beard. Why didn't we see it? Jessica asked between gasps. Why are we such idiots? Ryan released a forlorn sigh. Jessica, that's not a fair criticism. Nobody has ever worked with things like this. Even if we realized it was a possibility, it still would have been a coin toss as to whether it would work that way. I hate this as much as you do, believe me. There's nothing I wouldn't give to undo any of this. She sniffled and wiped her face, though it didn't help much when she was still crying. He must have been so scared. I don't care if he touched me inappropriately. He could hug me, touch me, anything he wanted, if it just made him feel like he wasn't alone. Joshua needed us, and we could do nothing for him. I hate that more than anything. I know. But hey, he might still be out there somewhere. Maybe he figured it out and we'll hear from him soon. Jessica gave a weak smile that looked like it would fade with a strong breeze. Thank you for trying, Ryan. But you read what he was going through. I can't afford hope right now, not when the possibilities could destroy me for having it. You don't realize how much I'm blaming myself right now. I did the math, ran the numbers over and over again, and yet I still miss this. We all did, just like Joshua said. Nobody is at fault. She scowled, and her face contorted with annoyance. Then what am I supposed to be angry at? What am I supposed to do with all this pain if I can't direct it at someone? Tell me! Ryan felt his heart sink. He had never seen Jessica like this before. She was always such a ray of sunshine, and now she was angry, hurt, and in despair. No matter how much he racked his mind, he could not find the words that would make this better. I don't know, he finally managed to say. Jessica's shoulders dropped. Her anger faded away, and she was left with nothing but soul-crushing loss. She slumped down, falling back against the counter as she sat there with puffy, vacant eyes. Tears occasionally ran down her face still, but they did so in silence now, as she didn't have the energy to weep or sob anymore. Ryan knew he had to do something, but for the life of him he could not figure out what it was. All he could do was try to think of things from a different angle, and try to bring the situation back to a sense of normalcy. He considered everything, and what Joshua might have gone through, and then came to her with a comforting smile. Hey, maybe we shouldn't focus on the bad things that might have happened. Maybe traveling really did help Joshua get a hold of himself. He lived through a completely unique situation, and just like how he discovered he could walk on water, he could probably find many other interesting things to experiment with. Perhaps he was even fun for him, and he could live a full life finding all the interesting things about the world as it was for him. She rolled her head up to stare at the ceiling. Her eyes were still devoid of the sparkle she once had, but she at least looked slightly less defeated. It's a nice thought, and thank you, Ryan. I know you're trying to be strong for me. I just can't believe he's gone. Ryan couldn't either. The whole situation was so abrupt and unexpected that he would probably still be processing it even weeks later. Just then, he had a thought, one so profound that he actually flinched slightly as his eyes widened in realization. Jessica picked up on the change in his posture and looked at him with a bit of worry. What? Is something else wrong? She really hoped not. Ryan blinked and shook his head. Oh, no. Everything is fine. It's just, I had a thought. Joshua was able to do all of this, literally in an instant, and then he went out into the world. He could do anything, and was technically everywhere and anywhere at all times. Doesn't that make him similar to a god? Jessica's eyes widened as she realized the implications of that. Both of them looked around the room one more time, seeing it in a new light despite the inherent destruction it represented. At that moment, they were each praying that Joshua had managed to keep it together. Frankly, Ryan didn't know how he was going to label this in the report he would have to write. One could call it an accident, or an ascendancy. It was just a matter of perspective.